What is up, you guys? Yes, I am back for another video. And I know I said this in the last video, but this video is gonna be a little different also. Mainly because I am getting into the Halloween mood. I mean, who doesn't like Halloween? And did I just have a random Jack Skellington pumpkin in my hands? Yes, I did. It stays in my bedroom most of the year. And so I think I'm gonna just set this little guy up right here so that you can enjoy his presence the entire video. I also have a nice little grave set right here. It's just like rocks and dead grass and little miniature graves. So if you can't tell, I am extremely excited for Halloween to be just around the corner. Just a couple more months. It's almost here. Fingers crossed it comes a lot faster. This story is called The Shadow Won't Go Away by the user Shadow Won't Leave. And there are actually two parts of the story. Let's get into it. No one believes me when I tell them this, and no one seems to be able to see it either. I honestly don't know what to do, and the only thing I can think of doing is sharing it here so that maybe, just maybe, someone will have experienced the same thing and know how to stop it. It all started when I was 5. I have no personal recollection of the event this bit from my mother's perspective. One night I was sitting on the living room couch watching Barney on our television. My brother and sister were at their father's house. My dad was in the office. And my mother was in her bedroom reading. After the living room had gone silent for a few minutes, my mother looked through the mirror that sat on top of her dresser. From the mirror she was able to see the living room couch, with me sitting on it. But she could also see a shadowy figure standing behind me. She quickly ran into the living room, only to find me sitting on the couch watching Barney. No one else in sight. I know I don't want to interrupt this story, but I literally have chills. It's one thing for like a kid to see something because that could be just part of their imagination. But the fact that the mom saw this, like, shows it wasn't just a, like, imagination going wild kind of thing. Sorry, let's continue. One thing that is important to note is that I am greatly terrified of the dark because of an incident that happened when I was 6. My aunt and uncle were staying at our house for a family get-together. One night I had a terrible nightmare and ran out of my bedroom to go and tell my mom and dad. However, I saw someone standing in the living room and automatically thought it must be my uncle. I ran over to him, but when I looked up at him and went to speak, nothing came out. I was met with a tall, shadowy figure looking down at me with dark red eyes. I slowly started to back away and went to run only to see another shadowy figure with golden eyes sitting on the couch. I ran as fast as my little legs could carry me back to my room. I looked back for just a brief second to see 3 pairs of eyes looking at me from the dark. I closed my door and ran to my bed, covering my head with a blanket. I cried myself to sleep that night, and from that day on, I was afraid of the dark and would never sleep without a light somewhere in my room. Even to this day, I still have the fear of the dark. Though it is getting better, I still have to sleep with a nightlight. A few years later, we moved out of that house, and my mom told me about what she saw that day. I'm going to be quite frank. I was absolutely terrified that she had even kept it from me all those years. A little more than a year ago, we moved back into the same house, and I must admit I was a bit worried to go back there because of other paranormal things that have occurred, which none of those have anything to do with this specific entity from what I can tell. If I discover that they do, I will go into detail about them later on. We moved back in December of 2016. We had owned the house in the 5 years we had been absent from the address. My grandfather in turn stayed there for those 5 years before he decided to move to be closer to his work. The first few months we didn't have much trouble with anything paranormal, but on my birthday I had some friends over and I made a very big mistake. I played a paranormal game called Charlie Charlie. The pencils moved only a few times and we ended it properly and did nothing to disrespect the spirit by breaking any rules. For the rest of that night, and even the rest of the month, the mood had shifted in my house, and any time I looked into the dark of the living room, I could make out a figure standing in the dark. I always thought it was a trick of my eyes, but deep down I knew something was there and that something was watching me. In October of 2017 is when things started getting freaky. One night I was trying to fall asleep and suddenly I heard something hit the ground. At first I assumed it was my cat, so I called his name and told him to go to bed. Usually when this happens I hear him shuffling away because of how long his claws are, but I didn't hear it. I sat up in my bed and saw that there was a book next to the door, laying on the ground. I went to get out of bed to pick it up, but I saw something in the doorway that brought back the fear. The fear of what lurks in the dark. A shadowy figure stood there in my doorway, almost bent over slightly, like it was too tall. It couldn't fit in the doorway. I panicked and covered my head with my blanket, just wishing it would go away. The next morning I told my mom about it, and surprise, surprise, she thought it was just from the lack of sleep. Though she didn't believe me, she gave me a flashlight to attach on my bed frame, so that if I hear or see something, all I have to do is grab my light. As the month continued, I started making a log of my encounters with the shadow. I know it isn't the most creative of names, but I had no other way to describe it. When it was November, I was so busy with my school musical that I was sound asleep once I got home. But it was there I honestly wouldn't have even noticed. But for some reason, these bruises started to appear on my legs and arms, and most of them were small, but then I got one on my hip and then my back. I know I'm a clumsy person, but I usually know when I've done something to hurt myself. It was the night of the last performance. I got home around almost midnight. I got into pajamas and went to sleep, but that night I wasn't able to drift off like the weeks previous. As hours clicked by, I laid there staring at the wall my bed is pushed up against. Suddenly, I felt something sharp touch my shoulder. My eyes widened. I couldn't find any words to call into the darkness. I hear a gravelly voice right in my ear. Not so tired tonight. Wow. Without a second thought, I grabbed the flashlight, clenching my eyes shut, shining it at whatever was behind me. The sharp pain in my shoulder disappeared. I stayed there. I was fearing what would happen if I left. The next morning, I looked in the mirror to find a long scratch all along my right shoulder. I didn't experience anything else until December 10th. It was 11:10 p.m. or so, and I hear this strange noise from my living room. Everyone else in my house asleep. So I'm just sitting there like, what was that? Everyone is asleep. So then I started texting my friend because I needed to take my mind off that. We stopped talking about midnight, and so I'm completely awake. But then someone walks past the window in the living room. I jump up and turn on the flashlight, running into the living room, looking around. My parents' door is closed, and so is my sister's. I go over to the blinds and look through them, and no one is walking around outside. Well, of course no one is. It's past midnight. So I go to head back to my room, and the bathroom door slams closed in front of me. I run over there and I ask, Did you close the bathroom door? My sister comes out of her room half asleep and glares at me. I'm shining the flashlight right in her eyes, and she swats it out of my hand. I asked her if she closed the bathroom door, and she said no, and I'm panicking at this point. I think someone is in the bathroom. She goes over to the door and opens it, reaching her hand, feeling for the light switch. She's looking at me as I'm picking up the flashlight. She turns on the light as I'm standing back up, and the shadow is standing there. Its head hits the ceiling, which is a good 10 feet up, probably more or less, and then it had red glowing eyes. I go to say something, and then she turns off the lights, saying, "See, nothing's there." Since most incidents, I started to talk to 3 of my friends about it. 2 of them are religious, and the other is agnostic. I, being an atheist, wanted other opinions on what to do. It isn't that I don't believe in ghosts. Hell, that's the one thing I do believe in. The friend that is agnostic started to do some research about my house for me. Eventually, in January, he came to me and told me that he found an article about someone being found dead where my house was built. The house hadn't been built yet. As soon as I got home, I asked my mom and dad about this, and they had no clue. You know the strangest part? When I went to pull up the article, it had been deleted. I knew something was deeper than just me and the shadow thing. It had to have started before me. I even got so deep down the rabbit hole that I contacted the owners of the house before us. I actually sat down at lunch with the son of the couple, and he told me about seeing a shadow person every night and it whispering to him in the dark. That's why they moved, and so far he's the only one who knows the position I'm in. Nothing happened from January since. But some of you are probably wondering why I'm posting about it now. Well, I'm scared to say that the reason I'm posting it now is because last night it appeared again. And this time, it wasn't alone.